This was a Supercars earthquake, something that you would
Yeah.
never expect to see less than a month before the season. And here we are, on Sunday on the Grid Live wrap up show. We just showed our grid preseason poll of how we think the grid ranking is going to go in 2024. And towards the top of the list, who is there? But Supercars, Brodie Kostecki, we're thinking that he's going to be one of the top competitors in the grid ranking this year, considering his championship winning season last year. And now we don't even know if Brodie Kostecki is even going to be in the grid ranking in 2024. Just shows you how quickly things change in motorsports. Yeah, like when I first saw this report from speedcafe.com, I had to do a double take because I was thinking April is not till a few months away. I thought it was an April Fool's Day joke, something that you wouldn't. This is just something you would not expect to see at all. Like I'm shocked because they literally just came off winning the championship. Erebus Motorsport, Brodie Kostecki, Betty Clemenco, Barry Ryan, everybody involved in the organization. They worked so hard to get to the point of winning this championship. And I am with Shane van Gisbergen leaving for NASCAR this year. I was thinking, there's a good chance that Brodie Kostecki and Erebus could, run it back and win another Supercars championship. And now, the team is confirming that Todd Hazelwood's going to be in Brodie's car to start the season in the Bathurst 500. And now we don't even know if Brodie is going to be in this car this year. Yeah, according to a report that Josh talked about, Brodie and the team are headed towards a split where where we're not going to see Brodie driving for Erebus, but the team is suggesting that Brodie is still under contract with Erebus, and we could potentially see him later in the season. Uh, yeah, but it doesn't really seem like that right now. It's just a really stunning development that we've seen come about. And Shane van Gisbergen, within the last hour, has put out a comment on the Brodie Kostecki story. SVG says that what a sad situation to read about in Australia right now with Brodie Kostecki. I went through a similar situation 10 or so years ago, not being able to say much to the team in the media, set a narrative that's out of your control. It's not fun. And SVG offered his full support for Brodie and said he hoped that it works out the correct way with Brodie enjoying driving race cars in 2024. So Shane van Gisbergen, all the way from North Carolina, is following the big story happening down under. Before I turn over to Matt, going to catch up on some comments here in the chat room. Oh yeah, Jose, thanks for reading the comment, and he said greetings from Panama. Glad to have you watching our show tonight, Jose. And Adam Lemeries says best wishes to Brodie Kostecki as well, and Ben. And then Ben, who was just on our shows, thanking everyone for all the comments in the chat, and Adam Lemeries, just like me, when he heard the news, I was absolutely surprised. Like I said, Adam, I thought it was some April Fool's Day joke that had been published, a few months ahead of time, because this is just stunning, like a major bombshell, as Josh said at the beginning. And then Joe Samniego has said, we talked about World Rally Championship having an identity crisis, and you're also saying the supercars have a bigger identity crisis without the past three champions gone from other series. I'm actually glad you brought that up, Joe, because we're gonna be talking about that in just a little bit. But first, I want to hear what Matt has to say on this question.
Yeah, we'll come to Joe's point there in a second. I was like you, Kobe. It was one of the first things I saw on what day are we now? Wednesday, almost Thursday. Tuesday morning, whenever it was, when it got posted into our grid chat, I was like, this is not the news I was expecting to wake up to this morning. We know that Brodie, post Adelaide, which was end of November, same weekend as the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, had tonsillitis. He's had his tonsils removed. And the first thing I thought was, surely that can't be still hampering him, because that was, 8 weeks ago. I've got a funny feeling somewhere in the back of my mind there was a shoulder injury at some point, but maybe I'm misthinking that up. And then I was like, well, the stories come from AVL, Angelo Van Leeuwen. He generally doesn't miss on a story. It took Erebus pretty much 24 hours to get that statement out that we just shared on screen before. What does it mean? We're going to get to it in a moment in the second part of this segment, but it's massive for Supercars and SVG throwing his weight behind Brodie. Scott McLaughlin's, I think, done the same, and it's kind of Scott going to IndyCar, which has kind of kicked this off, hasn't it, with SVG going to NASCAR, Brodie having that run last year and potentially more to come. We know Richard Childress was at Adelaide to watch Brodie win the championship last year, and they've got ties. Those teams have got ties, and maybe those ties have intermingled into Brodie. But it's going to be interesting to see how this pans out over the next couple of weeks. There's going to be a test day for that team and others next week. I believe it's at Queensland Raceway. So we'll have to see what happens there, and then obviously getting to Bathurst. The good news part of this story is that Todd Hazelwood, who was on the bench basically after losing his full-time ride next year, has now just been given the keys to the chocolate factory, and he's going to be driving the Champions car from last year, and a brand new car as well, because they've had to build 2 new cars over the off-season break Erebus. So Todd, who was going to be running in Porsche Carrera Cup this year in Australia and was lined up to be a co-driver for the endurance part of the year, probably with Brodie, now gets a full-time run at the mountain in the 500 on the first weekend of the season. So that is a big thumbs up to Todd Hazelwood, who was a bit unfortunate really to end up losing his seat last year, and certainly someone that's got good potential to go after a race winning some proper equipment. So good for him, but we'll have to see how this Kostecki story rumbles through over the next weeks and months.
Should Supercars start getting worried about losing their best drivers?
Yeah, Joe preempted this with his question from before. We already had it to discuss. Well, yes, and I think we kind of talked about this on our pre-season prediction show back at the beginning of the month. What was Supercars going to look like this year with another of their big names missing in Shane van Gisbergen going to NASCAR? Kostecki probably on paper before the season would have been the favourite, but probably to, as Kobe said before, run it back and win the championship for a second time with 2 drop scores, basically, if he does come back for the second round, which is at the Grand Prix, in support of the Australian Grand Prix. He's going to be obviously behind the 8 ball already. There's been rumours about Cam Waters maybe having a run in NASCAR. Chaz Mostert, another of the top end guys, has been doing some endurance racing stuff in his time. Had a bit of a tie-up with BMW a few years ago, although that seems to have fizzled out a little bit over the last couple of years, and he's committed to just trying to win the championship down under. So have they got a problem? I mean, there was so much talk this time last year and at the first round at Newcastle how none of the drivers really liked this new car and all the problems that came along with it over the last couple of years, and obviously it was affected by COVID and supply issues and all those kind of things as well. But really, it's much to our hour-long discussion on F1. This saddens me that my favourite championship is losing all their top guys to pastures new. Okay, there's a good crop of young talent coming through, but if you've got no superstars at the top to sow your championship around, then it really is a struggle. Matthew Owens behind the mic says not to beat the dead horse, but again, it's all coming up aces for NASCAR. No identity challenges, no Formula One type BS, no manufacturer threatening to pull out. NASCAR is in the driver's seat. I can't disagree. They have got everything going their way at the moment. Ben says championship rankings at Phoenix were down. NASCAR may have some good things going, but it's hard for me to look at those numbers as all coming up aces. It isn't all, but it is trajectorying in the right direction. Whereas Supercars over the last, 4 or 5 years have been petering in this direction, and it's just starting to tip. But if they lose all of their top drivers, it's going that way. And there's been calls for changing of the commentary box, and there's been all the wranglings over the TV deals over the last couple of years. They just need something positive to happen. And they start at Bathurst, which would be positive, apart from the fact that we shouldn't be having 2 rounds at Bathurst in the championship season.
Yeah, Matt, totally agree with you on that, and I think we've already covered that in previous episodes of the Bathurst 500. Yeah, so we don't really need to dive into that anymore. The only time Supercars race at Bathurst is later in the year for the Bathurst 1000, and that's it. But yeah, but it's unfortunate to see what happened at the beginning of the season, with the Newcastle 500 going away and all of that. But getting back to the question that you asked, Josh, should Supercars start getting worried about losing their best drivers? I think so. Starting now, I think you have to be a little bit concerned, and you have to really look in the mirror and ask yourself, like, what are we doing? Like, why are our best and most recognizable drivers leaving the series? Obviously Jamie Whincup was getting up there in age, so he decided to take a step back, and when he's behind the wheel, he's with Brock Feeney, as the co-driver for the endurance events, and then sometimes we'll see Jamie in their Mercedes AMG GT3 as well, making some sports car starts as well. So that's enough to keep him busy. after his full-time driving retirement. Scott McLaughlin, he dominated his supercars for a while, and then he left for a new challenge in the IndyCar series. Shane van Gisbergen also dominated the series, and then decided to also go for new challenges over in NASCAR. And now we don't know what Brodie Kostecki's future is going to be after all of this has come about. So it's certainly going to be very interesting to continue to follow this story develop, to see where Brodie Kostecki is going to be racing in 2024. But all in all, I think supercars certainly have to be a little concerned after seeing their most recognizable drivers in situations like this. But on the positive side of things, it can open the door for some other young drivers to emerge, as stars of the sports as well. Like your Brock Feeney's, your McCain's, Richie Stanaway's, those drivers who you hear of, but you obviously they're not as big as like a Scott McLaughlin or a Shane van Gisbergen or a Brodie Kostecki. I think this could be a great moment for those young drivers to really put themselves in the driver's seat as the face of the series. But replacing the likes of McLaughlin, SVG, and if Brodie Kostecki, is going to be leaving supercars. We don't know what, like I say, we don't know what his future is going to be. It's going to be very tough to replace those guys.